It's time for the Texas Perspective on current news and events. A man who calls it like he sees it, without the normal political correctness you may have grown comfortable with. This show is not for the faint of heart or easily offended. Chances are you will learn something and along the way get to hear some great music from bands you may have missed. The doctor is in, and he will see you now.
Well, I guess we better get on with it.
Well, good Saturday morning, Beaumont. Glad to have you here. We're going to be here for the full hour today, so please stick around and enjoy the entire show. I want to get started right here with the mainstream media absolutely melting down after Donald Trump ripped dictator Zelensky. Tyler Durden over at Zero Hedge had this to say about that. The expected reaction for the mainstream pundits and Ukraine's backers to Trump's Wednesday post decreeing Zelensky as a dictator has just caused an absolute meltdown. It's been swift and fierce. The fact checkers are out in force. For instance, the New York Times quickly putting out a piece entitled "Trump falsely says Ukraine started the war with Russia. Here's what to know." They want the public to know why the country isn't holding elections. Well, I should point this out. Ukraine did not start this war. America started this war. This goes back to Victoria Nuland. This goes back to John Bolton. And, of course, Victoria Nuland, don't forget, went to Ukraine and took Senators Obama and Richard Lugar with her to create the first bioweapons lab over there in Ukraine. And without that, we would never have had COVID. But the good news is Americans funded that lab. We wrote the check for COVID. And none of those guys will ever be prosecuted for any of their crimes against humanity. But, hey, I digress. So, Ukraine didn't start the war. America did. The millions of Ukrainians that have died in this war so far, well, that's all on you because you paid for it with your tax dollars. And I want to be very frank with you. This would never have happened had we not allowed an election to be stolen here in America. And those of us that did show up on January the 6th, well, a lot of us ended up going to jail. Not me. I mean, I'm grateful for that, but a lot of my associates did end up in jail, and they spent several years in a gulag in America. So we tried to stand up, but most of the American citizens were willing to peacefully accept the January 6th stolen election. Anyway, moving back to the story. Many are using this moment to draw a line in the sand, describing Trump as being in a state of madness, saying it's time for the world to unambiguously side with Zelensky, as did the German Greens party member of the European Parliament. Sergei Lagodzinski said, "The only possible reaction to this madness is to side with President Zelensky and his people. This time vis-a-vis a country and a superpower you could never have imagined that you would have to." Puck News co-founder Julia Jaffe is dumbfounded and outraged. "I could not understand why this American establishment and its institutions are folding so quickly. What are you people afraid of? You never even had gulags." Well, we did, didn't we, for the J6ers? Also, I want to mention at this point, George Soros has pulled up stakes and moved to the European Union. It turns out that the Soros Foundation was being almost entirely funded by U.S. aid. You go back to the Black Lives Matter movement and all of those riots they had where lots of people were killed and buildings were destroyed, all paid for with your tax dollars. The first impeachment, all paid for with your tax dollars. It would never have happened were it not for Politico being funded by U.S. aid and your tax dollars. This is another reason why they're all going absolutely berserk. There are absurd accusations that Donald Trump has switched sides, which Zelensky strongly suggested earlier that Russia is simply feeding him disinformation. I know some other relatively knowledgeable people that feel the same way, that Trump is not getting good information. My position on that is simply this. If you bet against Donald Trump, you are very likely to lose. I mean, 2 impeachments, neither of them successful. He is the all-time champion. Nicholas von Twickel said on X, Trump is in the middle of executing one of the most jaw-dropping pivots in American foreign policy in generations. A 180-degree turn that will force friends and foes to recalibrate in fundamental ways. The reaction from the neocons has been predictably loud. John Bolton said Trump's characterizations of Zelensky and Ukraine are some of the most shameful remarks ever made by a U.S. president. Our support of Ukraine has never been about charity. Our way of life at home depends on our strength abroad. Well, there is some truth to that last statement. We do need to have strength abroad, but remember, John Bolton was making money on this deal. More from Europe. Olaf Scholz challenges Trump for calling Zelensky a dictator. He said, well, that's simply false and dangerous to deny Zelensky Democrat legitimacy in turn. German FM Baerstock, Foreign Minister Baerstock, called Trump's words completely absurd. Vice President J.D. Vance is pushing back, however, along with other top Trump administration officials, warning that Zelensky is going to resent this feud and the bad-mouthing of President Trump. Musk has been pushing back. For example, he tweeted out the following list by a prominent pro-Trump account, DC Drano. He said, you want to know why Trump called Zelensky a dictator? Here are the facts. Number one, he's now serving year 6 of his 5-year term. Zelensky declared martial law in February 2022 and has banned elections since then. Zelensky banned 11 political parties from existing in Ukraine. And then in 2022, he passed a law to censor the journalists and combined all news into one government-owned station. Journalists investigating his corruption get conscripted. That is, they throw them in the military and they send them to the front lines to die. The list ended with the observation that even Saddam Hussein continued to hold elections. We should add this to the list of the ongoing persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church by the Zelensky government, and this is merely because it maintains spiritual communion with the Moscow Patriarchate. So, Zelensky cannot claim to represent the will of the people in Ukraine unless he restores the freedom of the press and stops canceling elections. President Trump has absolutely excoriated Zelensky in a growing tit-for-tat, which is fast turning into an exchange of wide-ranging criticisms and direct insults. Donald Trump is in a fresh Truth Social post where he dismissed the Ukrainian leader as a moderately successful comedian. In fact, I'll just read you that post here. Think of it, Donald Trump said. A modestly successful comedian, Vladimir Zelensky, talked the United States into spending $350 billion to go into a war that could not possibly be won, and it never had to start. But a war that he, without the U.S. and me, Donald Trump, would never be able to settle. The United States has spent more than $200 billion above what Europe has spent. Europe has their money guaranteed, while the United States will get nothing. Why didn't Sleepy Joe demand some sort of equalization in this war? This is far more important to Europe than it is to us because we have a big, beautiful ocean as separation. But on top of this, Zelensky admits that half of the money we sent him is missing. He refuses to have elections. He's very low in the Ukrainian polls, 4%. And the only thing he was good at playing was Biden. And he played him like a fiddle, a dictator without elections. Zelensky better move faster. He's not going to have a country left. In the meantime, we are successfully negotiating an end to the war with Russia, something that we all admit that only Trump and the Trump administration could ever do. Biden never tried. Europe has failed to bring peace. Zelensky probably wants to keep the gravy train going. I personally, Donald Trump, love Ukraine, but Zelensky has done a terrible job. His country is shattered. Millions have unnecessarily died, and it continues. So, how did we get here? Vladimir Zelensky is reeling in the wake of President Trump's words. He's responded to a reporter's question about Zelensky and European partners demanding a seat at the table in any negotiations with Trump, with Moscow. Trump said, look, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it in 3 years. You should never have started it. Once again, this goes back to the fact that the United States promised Russia when Ukraine was created that we would never allow them to become a NATO nation. I should also remind you that during the Clinton administration, Putin requested membership in NATO and was turned down summarily. So perhaps the most personally insulting words aimed at Zelensky on Tuesday when Trump ripped him for canceling the elections. He said, we have a situation here where we haven't had elections in Ukraine. We have martial law. I hate to say it, but your 4% approval rating, your country has been blown to smithereens. Country looks like a massive demolition site. Well, Zelensky hit back on Wednesday, telling Ukrainian broadcaster that Trump lives in a disinformation bubble. The Ukrainian leader specifically referenced Trump's words from the prior day, saying the war should never have started. He said Trump's team needs more truth. Unfortunately, President Trump, I have great respect for him as leader of the nation, and that we have great respect for the American people who have always given us billions of dollars with no oversight. But Donald Trump lives in a disinformation space, Zelensky said. Really? He further suggested that it is Russia that's feeding Trump falsehoods on the conflict. Zelensky said, are we talking about 4%? We've seen disinformation like this before. I guess Zelensky still thinks he's very popular over there. So Zelensky sought to address the growing criticism of the democratic situation, saying his country couldn't hold elections because martial law is still in effect. We're focusing on the survival of our country. I'm doing it really all my term. So it's craziness that's going on over there. He also asked about the question of U.S. taking NATO membership off the table, somewhat shocking European allies. And Zelensky said, if we're not in NATO, then NATO has to be in Ukraine. We need an army comparable with Russia's soldiers, about 1.3 to 1.5 million soldiers. Well, it's all very scary, and you should be worried. So, getting down to the bottom line is simply this. Zelensky has let his frustration and anger with Trump be known in abruptly canceling a pre-scheduled visit to Saudi Arabia, and he stated the fact that the U.S. held direct talks with Russia, helping Putin out of his long isolation, he said. Putin has since acknowledged that a full restoration of relations with Washington is underway, and the talks will continue. Right now, here's what the pollsters are saying. There's a 21% chance that Zelensky will be out of Ukraine as a leader before July, and there's a 51% chance that they will hold elections in 2025. Well, we shall see. Be right back. Got a lot more for you today.
I like the sounds of cannons on the horizon, please return with me to the amazing Greene Show, because I like things that go kaboom.
Welcome back. In the other exciting news segment, this is blowing my mind. Liz Truss was the former Prime Minister of England, and quite frankly should be the Prime Minister now, but they had a little problem with stealing elections over there. But anyway, Liz Truss told the audience at the Conservative Political Action Committee, CPAC, that her country is failing and they need a MAGA-type movement to save it. She's absolutely right. She said, "We now have a major problem in Britain that judges are making decisions that formerly would have been made by elected politicians," Truss said. She added that the British judiciary is no longer accountable to the people due to reforms by her predecessor, Tony Blair, who was, of course, a Marxist. He handed the power over to an unelected bureaucracy, removing any power that the people may have had. "There's no doubt in my mind," she said, "until these changes are reversed, we in Britain do not have a functioning country. The English state is failing. It is not working. The decisions are being made not by politicians, but by unelected bureaucrats." Truss also said the UK voters have grown increasingly angry because they keep voting for change, only to be let down over and over and over, including by the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, who is also an avowed Marxist. "The same people are still making the decisions," she said. "It's the deep state. It's the unelected bureaucrats. It's the judiciary," Truss said. "I think what ultimately will happen, and what I hope to see, is a movement like you have here in the United States with the MAGA, Make America Great Again folks, and with CPAC. With all of these organizations that ultimately pushes change we all want, we will have a British CPAC." Truss then said, "We want Elon and his nerd army of muskrats examining the British deep state." Truss's comments are emblematic of the growing right-wing movement across Europe, as voters in Germany, Austria, France, and the Netherlands have been gravitating towards populism amid the failed Greene policies. Not this Greene. Unchecked immigration and censorship policies that violate the basic human rights. According to the failed New York Times, which spoke with Europeans who voted for right-wing candidates, people cast their ballots in fury, in frustration, in protest, perhaps most of all in a bid to bring change to a system that they believe has failed them and is not fulfilling the contract between their democratically elected governments and the people. They talked openly about nationalism, immigration, stagnant economies, the cost of living, housing shortages, anger at the elite and their countries perceived to be buckling to what many consider politically correct views. Their voices offer a window into the choices Europeans may make in the years ahead. The main event will be the February 23rd snap federal election after the collapse of the governing coalition in Germany. This is where the far-right alternative for Germany, the AfD, has made tremendous gains. We should point out the reason for this, because Islam has literally taken over Germany in what I would consider poetic justice, since the Nazis aligned with Islam during World War II. I think those chickens are coming home to roost. But I digress. This is going to be a big deal. Voters in Italy, Poland, Norway, Ireland, Romania, and the Czech Republic, all countries where populist movements are either well established or on the rise, are expected to choose new leaders on the local and national level. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage's Reform Party is on track to win the next election in Britain. Farage, one of my favorites, he has a radio show here somewhere, has notably slammed the impact of net zero on the British economy. He said he's got one mission, and that is to re-industrialize Britain and achieve a 180% shift in the country's policies. Most of you younger people don't realize, but Britain used to be a manufacturing economy. It was the engine that ran the world before the United States took its place. There are reasons to cheer for Reform HQ this morning. Nigel Farage's party is leading Labour in the YouGov voting intention poll for the first time. According to the poll, Reform UK leads on 25 points, with Labour in second place and 24%, and the Conservatives in third place at 21%. I don't know exactly what conservative means in Britain anymore. Meanwhile, the Liberal Democrats are 14% and the Greens at 9%. While there have been a handful of polls to date putting Reform in the lead, they have so far been regarded as outliers. In response to the poll, Richard Tice, the deputy leader of Reform, said, "Much more to come as common sense policies welcomed to save Britain and make us better off." So this is kind of a big deal. Once again, I want to thank Tyler Durden over at Zero Hedge for that insightful column. And now this. Well, my friends, I need to remind you that Freedom 1300 does not run on sunshine and well water. We absolutely need your support. So if you have a business here in the Beaumont area or anywhere in the Golden Triangle, and that includes some of our friends listening in Louisiana, this is the place you should be advertising. If you're the best at what you do, you need to let people know that. And that way you get like-minded listeners to join your business and support you. If you decide to join up, you're going to get your name and logo right there. You're going to get your email address and phone number right there. And you're going to get bumps throughout the day on Freedom 1300 on all the different shows. Plus the fact you're going to get a button on the website with your company name and information on it so that people can go to your website quickly and easily. And if you happen to have products for sale online, this works especially well because it works 24/7 at freedom1300.com. So call Doc today. That's me, 281-914-1331, 281-914-1331. And let's get you on this because we need to build your business. This is the golden age. I know money is tight right now, but we want to make sure money is not tight for you. So join us today at freedom1300.com. Plus, you're going to get a 1-minute live read on this show every Saturday and every day of the week. So you're going to get heard a lot. 281-914-1331. 281-914-1331. Call Doc, 281-914-1331. So we have this. Montana is considering a proposal that would ban mRNA vaccines across the entire state. It has passed out of committee. Republican lawmakers are now supporting legislation that would ban the use of mRNA vaccines in most medical circumstances. I should remind you that Dr. Malone, the guy who owns the patent on mRNA, said it was never intended to be used in a vaccine. What they designed it for was for people that were quadra and paraplegics, that it would help to regain function of their limbs. Never supposed to be in a vaccine. Anyway, sponsored by Reps Greg Kometz and Tracy Sharp and Lucas Schubert up in Montana, House Bill 371 would ban the administering of vaccines that use mRNA and or messenger ribonucleic acid in humans. Last week, the Montana House Judiciary Committee voted to send the bill to the floor after hearing testimony for and against the proposal, according to NBC. NBC is nothing but crap. Montana. mRNA vaccines are the most destructive and lethal medical products that have ever been used in medical history, according to Dr. Christine Drivdahl Smith, a family physician in Miles City, Montana. Also providing testimony was Derek Ostreicher, the chief legal counsel for the Montana Family Foundation, which works to inform parents about decisions related to their children's health care. While mRNA vaccines are still in their infancy, we do not yet fully understand the long-term consequences of introducing this synthetic genetic material into the human body. And the rush to roll these vaccines out without adequate long-term studies has left many individuals questioning the wisdom of their own medical choices. Once again, I would refer you to a table that I published on my Facebook page where it demonstrates that your chances of dying from almost any of these deadly diseases is less than 1 in a million, whereas your chance from dying from almost any vaccine is about 1 in 76,000. So why would you take a vaccine that is 10 times to 100 times more likely to kill you than the disease you're taking the vaccine for? That defies common sense, if you ask me. Anyway, this bill would ban mRNA vaccines for infectious diseases. Exclusions have been carved out for gene therapy products that are used to treat cancers and genetic disorders. But then once again, with cancer, they're having really good luck with some other less invasive treatments. Ivermectin? Yes, ivermectin is curing cancer everywhere. Under the terms of the bill, any healthcare professional caught administering a gene-based vaccine to a person in Montana would face a $500 fine per violation, could risk losing their medical license. In my personal opinion, that is no penalty at all. It is currently unclear whether the bill has sufficient support to pass. Republicans control both houses in Montana, but they remain short of a supermajority. The state also has a Republican governor, Greg Gianforte. Donald Trump's Secretary of Health and Human Services, RFK, is known to have skepticism about mRNA technology and has insisted that anyone who wishes to take a vaccine should remain free to do so. Once again, why would you take a vaccine for a disease where your chances of dying are maybe 1 in a million, and the vaccine chances of dying are 1 in 76,000? Makes no sense to me. Anyway, I bring this out because I think Texas should be on the forefront of this. But it really irks me that because of people like our worthless Speaker of the House, Dustin Burrows, we refuse to lead on anything. They're up there worrying about lining their own pockets in the Pink Palace, and they just don't really care about you. I'd recommend you give them a call.
Meanwhile, in other news, I know that most of you, just like me, wake up every day with a smile on our face because we're seeing what's happening with the Doge. And if you missed my show yesterday, with Wilbur Witt's assessment of this, a parable, if you will, you need to go back and listen to that. And you can find that on rumble.com, which, by the way, if you're listening to this on Rumble, please like and share and leave a comment. If it wasn't for Duck Dew, I don't know who would even put a comment on this show. Anyway, thanks, Duck. I appreciate it. The Trump administration is making good on its promise to drain the swamp and restore law and order. Attorney General Pam Bondi has fired Pamela Hicks from her role as chief counsel to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, BATFI, as it's otherwise known. Once again, the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, I maintain that, at least here in Texas, if not throughout the United States, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms should be the name of a convenience store. Because alcohol is a legal substance. We got rid of prohibition long ago. Tobacco is a legal substance. I don't recommend it, but if you want to chew it or smoke it, well, it's legal. And allegedly, firearms are protected from infringement by the Constitution. Of course, we all know that's a lie because firearms are the most infringed article that you can buy in the United States. There are so many rules and regulations to buying a firearm. It's mind-boggling. But anyway, they're doing something about that right now by firing Pamela Hicks from the ATF. A powerful statement that Trump wrote on Truth Social. Over the past 4 years, the Department of Injustice has been politicized like never before. Therefore, I've instructed the termination of all remaining Biden-era U.S. attorneys. We must clean house immediately and restore confidence. America's golden age must have a fair justice system. That begins today. Well, it kind of does, but I should remind you that this actually began with the Bill Clinton administration because on day one, when he swept into office, he fired every acting U.S. Attorney General across the entire United States in one fell swoop. And of course, he did that because he knew they were investigating him, and he knew that if it got to a grand jury, he would be toast. That may never happen. Anyway, this move has really rattled all of the lefty operatives embedded into the Department of Injustice because they've constantly used their positions to undermine the rule of law and to protect the corrupt Democrats. Well, and a few corrupt Republicans, too. According to NBC News, that's nothing but crap, one fired U.S. attorney received an official termination letter from Trent Morse, the deputy director of the Office of Presidential Personnel, which read, "At the direction of President Donald J. Trump, I'm writing to inform you that your position as U.S. attorney is terminated effective immediately. Pack your stuff and get the heck out of here." Attorney General Pam Bondi, without a doubt the best-looking Attorney General in history, wasted no time in carrying out Trump's mission to restore fair and impartial Justice Department, leading to Hicks' immediate dismissal. Earlier today, she said, I was served official notice from the Attorney General of the United States that I was being removed from my position as Chief Counsel of the ATF, and my employment with the Department of Injustice has been terminated. That's what Hicks put on her LinkedIn account. Of course, I don't have a LinkedIn account anymore because I said some things they didn't like. As you know, the owner of LinkedIn is a never-Trumper, and he hates anything that even remotely represents a democratic republic. Anyway, I digress. She continued, I have had the privilege of serving the federal civil service for almost 28 years, including 23 years as an attorney for the Department of Injustice, serving as ATF Chief Counsel. It's been the highest honor of my career, and working with the people at the ATF throughout the department has been my pleasure. I want to thank my colleagues for their friendship and partnership over the years. Well, despite the flowery farewell, Hicks' tenure at the ATF under the Biden administration saw an increased infringement on lawful gun owners in violation of the Second Amendment, while ignoring the actual real crime wave that is sweeping the country. Her departure marks a step in restoring a justice system that serves the American people, rather than the radical leftists that are trying to destroy the American people. Well, let me say this about that. I think it's time that you call your state reps, you call your state senators, and you call Governor Abbott and Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and you insist that they legalize the Second Amendment. The Second Amendment just needs to be made foundational American law. Oh, you thought it was? You must be living under a rock somewhere. Meanwhile, being the, quote, richest man in the world, unquote, sending rockets into space may turn out to be less of an adventure than being a person taxed with the Doge. Besides the monumental task compared to the mythological Hercules, cleaning up the Aegean stables is one of his hardest labors. It's also fraught with danger. The threats against the tech billionaire and Doge head Elon Musk have multiplied lately, with endless liberal globalists enraged by the sight of his department cutting the pork. I mean, it really blows my mind that we have a guy who went in there, started looking at your bank account, said, holy crap, your banker is robbing you blind, and you're mad at the guy that told you your banker is robbing you blind. Musk takes these mostly in stride, however, commenting that even death chants against him are just awful music. However, the Trump administration is not kidding around. Democrat Representative Robert Garcia of California has received a letter from the U.S. Attorney from the District of Columbia, Edward Martin, seeking clarification on comments that the House member made during a CNN interview on February the 12th, where he stated, what the American public wants is for us to bring actual weapons to this bar fight in the context of opposing Musk's work. Elsewhere, violent reactions are having tragic repercussions, as in words have consequences. So there was a Tesla dealership that was shot up in Oregon following violent rhetoric from Democrat politicians. Elon Musk said, my security details should be bigger. He said, I'm open to ideas for improving security. I don't actually have a death wish. I even had people like President Bukele of El Salvador who managed to put 100,000 murderous thugs in prison, and even he called me being worried about my security. He said, how did you put all those thugs in prison without dying? I asked. That seems not easy. Well, the president is even investigating Chuck Schumer for the threats that he has made, saying they're going to bring a war to you. You guys are screwing with things that are not supposed to be messed with. In other words, the Democrat slush fund. And there are a lot of people out here that really don't want that to happen. Well, all I can tell you is I get up every day with a smile on my face. I say, go Doge, go Elon Musk, let's do it.
You have a choice, and you chose Freedom 1300.
Marvin the Martian. When you miss it, you make me very, very angry.
The Doge is kicking butt and taking names. The Department of Governmental Efficiency is about to provide a staff member access to the IRS data, and this is causing the media and Democrats to spin into a frenzy. Gavin Klager, a software engineer who works at Doge, will be based at the IRS for 120 days. He will reportedly have access to the tax agency's data, according to the Monday report from the Communist News Network. Klager will work as a senior advisor for the IRS acting commissioner. Waste, fraud, and abuse have been deeply entrenched in our broken system for far too long. It takes direct access to the system to identify and fix it, White House Deputy Press Secretary Harrison Fields told the Communist News Network about the move. Doge is going to continue to shine a light on the fraud that they uncover, as the American people deserve to know what their government has been doing with the money they have stolen from the American people. Now, I want to remind you folks once again, for the first 119 years of the United States existence, there was no income tax. There was no IRS. Then they created the 16th Amendment, which to enable the IRS, sort of, except for it was never ratified. They just did it anyway because they wanted your money, and they wanted to make sure that no one in the United States could easily become a member of the wealthy class. Anyway, getting back to this, CNN is deeply concerned that Klager would receive access to private data like Social Security numbers, bank account information, and tax returns. You know, like the one that they released on Donald Trump, violation of the law. Anyway, they breathlessly quoted a letter from Oregon Communist Ron Wyden and Massachusetts Communist Senator Elizabeth Warren, aka Pocahontas, in which they asked the acting commissioner to immediately disclose to the Senate Committee on Finances the full extent of the potential access to the IRS system and data granted to Doge team members. Both Wyden and Warren believe they need to know that information so they can address any efforts by Doge personnel to gain access to taxpayer records at the IRS, which may constitute criminal violation of federal privacy laws. Like they care about your privacy, right? Are you aware that tax returns and return information are subject to strong legal privacy protections, the letter added, adding that Doge officials sweeping access to these systems may be in violation of these statutes? Could I just remind you that there is no privacy in America, and the reason why these Democrat politicians want you to not have this information is because you're going to find out how a congressman or a senator making an average of $100,000 a year became a multimillionaire in just a few years. Americans have heard much about who is able to access this sensitive information, but the media doesn't really care who had access during the data during the Biden years. One report from the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration revealed that as of September 2023, there were 919 other individuals who had full access to IRS data. That unmasked data contains personally identifiable information and requires executive-level approval access. Do you remember Lois Lerner and how she went after all of us conservatives? Anyway, 20 of those individuals were simply researchers and student volunteers. Nobody cared about that, did they? Well, maybe it's because you didn't know. In other words, the media and the Democrats had no reason to be concerned about these novices and young students accessing information in our government with full access until Donald Trump came into power. And of course, I've already talked about on this show, you see why the entire world fears Donald Trump, because they've had a corrupt situation going where they've been robbing you blind, and now you are finding out the truth. Anyway, no matter how much Wyden and Warren and their professional propagandists over the Communist News Network complain, these efforts toward government efficiency are going to continue. And if anything, it is more clear than ever the Democrats have simply run out of ideas to stop it.
Meanwhile, in the good news section, the Senate has confirmed Kash Patel to be the new FBI director. This happened in a 51-49 vote after Democrats attempted to draw out the confirmation process, which they did, the objective being to allow the FBI people more time to shred their documents. Two Republicans, well, they call them Republicans, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins of Maine, both avowed Marxists, voted against the confirmation. It was surprising, though, Mitch the Turtle McConnell, or whoever is operating him, did vote for him. Patel is the 19th of President Trump's nominees to be confirmed, continuing a record-breaking pace of Senate confirmations that has outpaced the three past administrations. Patel served as Senior Director of Counterterrorism at the National Security Council and Deputy Director of National Intelligence during the previous Trump administration. Republican Iowa Senator Charles Grassley, chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, expressed his support for Patel on the Senate floor Tuesday, pointing out that while Patel's resume doesn't look like that of a typical FBI director, that is, read not deep state, we're not living in normal times. Patel is the right man at the right time, Grassley said. Mr. Patel serves as a public defender, a counterterrorism prosecutor under President Obama, and a House staffer. He fought for transparency and accountability in the government. He poses a threat to the existing globalist system that has retaliated against anyone who got in the way of their unlawful acts. He has engaged in unprecedented lawfare against the president and the American people and obstructed congressional oversight. But Mr. Patel is going to end these abuses. He will restore the FBI to its essential mission of keeping Americans safe. A lot of you realized, as I did, that when they got rid of James Comey, who was absolutely a deep state anti-American activist, and replaced him with Commissioner Wray, well, Wray was just a continuation on. No difference, nothing changed. Wray oversaw the injustices going on in the FBI. And I got to remind you once again, the FBI was started by a cross-dressing pervert in order to get information on his potential political enemies. And after that, it just went straight to hell. Anyway, Patel has called to shut down the FBI headquarters in the past, said I'd shut the Hoover building down on day one and reopen it the next day as a museum of the deep state. He said that during an episode on the Sean Ryan Show, which if you've not watched that on YouTube, it's worth your time. In an op-ed he wrote for the Wall Street Journal in January, he revised his vision for a new FBI, starting off rebuilding the public trust in this agency, increasing congressional oversight, and apprehending more criminals by letting good cops be cops. If there are any good cops in the FBI, and I have some question as to whether or not there are any, Republican Missouri Senator Eric Schmidt posted in a video a support of Patel on Thursday, saying he's coming to town to reform an agency that desperately needs it. And of course, we know that it's desperately needed. I don't know about you. I am very, very excited about the fact that Patel is going to be taking over this utterly corrupt and unconstitutional agency, and I expect to see some good things. And let me close it out with this. Jasmine Crockett, she's a Texas Democrat right here. She's been yelling about mediocre white boys who oppose diversity programs and getting into shouting matches with other committee meeting members. We can always expect her to speak her mind, and of course what we've discovered is that she doesn't appear to have one. That's exactly what she did when she was a guest on The View on Wednesday. Of course, I know none of you watch The View, and I don't want... Who would? Crockett was asked about the broad sentiment among voters that Donald Trump is keeping his campaign promises, a reality they are rewarding with substantial approval ratings, coupled with the struggling Democrat party system seen by many as far too Marxist and left-wing. I should point out to you that Donald Trump currently is enjoying the highest approval rating of any president ever recorded in history, and this is because he is doing exactly what he said he would do, and he's keeping the promises. My takeaway is just like the election, she said, we've got to do better at education. People just don't understand. And that's when she embarked on her latest rant, claiming that Donald Trump would take money out of the pockets of the elderly and that he would personally cause planes to crash. But you will understand when those hospitals in rural America start closing down even more. You will understand when you don't have Social Security. You will understand when your Medicaid and your Medicare goes away, Crockett continued. You will understand when planes continue to fall out of the sky. Crockett even claimed that voters should have known that even former Joe Biden president would have been preferable to Donald Trump. Soon you will understand why it's important to maybe have somebody that isn't loud and ridiculous. Maybe Sleepy Joe is what we really wanted because we could at least sleep at night. That last remark was met with applause from the audience on The View, but everyday Americans were not applauding. The typical voter this year was concerned about illegal immigration, where we've gone from having an 11,000 people a day coming across our border to less than 200. The economy and other issues toward which Trump and the Republicans have been directly speaking. The average voter could hardly be bothered to care about the preferred pronouns or climate activism, which the Democrats were spending so much of their time with. The average voter didn't care about the condescending tone that the Democrats took toward them, or the Democrats insisting they should ignore their lying eyes and believe what they were being told by the media. The Democrats, in other words, do have an education problem. They have a Jasmine Crockett problem. And you've got to ask yourself, who are these people that even voted her in? Are there really Texans that are that stupid? Anyway, they need more advocates who can understand and offer viable solutions to the issues the American people are facing, not more activists that can spew leftist talking points while declaring that everything is fine and the unwashed masses are the true problem. Now, I'll give you this. I think Jasmine Crockett's kind of cute. But like AOC, she's dumber than a rock. And I don't know who voted for her. And I hope that after we get rid of all the illegal aliens and clean up our voter rolls, and we get rid of all the people on there that are over 150 years old, I hope things are going to change. And I should remind you that Donald Trump is being very dastardly. They have just cut off all benefits for Civil War veterans. That's right. Civil War veterans will receive no more benefits from the government. See you on Monday. And you still haven't called me to set up your advertising yet. Come on, let's get your business into the golden age of America. Advertise right here on Freedom 1300 AM in Beaumont. We will make your phone ring. 281-914-1331. 281-914-1331. Yes, 281-914-1331. You have a choice, and you chose Freedom 1300.